For nearly 4 decades, Alison Krauss built her life around one thing: her voice. Then, almost overnight, it began to fail her. Tours were quietly canceled, fans were left guessing, and behind closed doors, she was fighting a condition that threatened to end everything she'd worked for, while at the same time navigating heartbreak, silence, and rumors of retirement. Why did Alison Krauss quit music for several years? And what really happened during those missing years? You'd be shocked to find out. The rise of Alison Krauss. Alison Krauss is one of those rare artists whose reputation was built quietly, over time, without scandals or public meltdowns. By the time most people outside bluegrass truly discovered her, she was already considered one of the best in the field. That's why it shocked so many fans when she suddenly stepped away from music for years, with no warning and no explanation. The reason behind that absence was not creative burnout or industry conflict. It was something deeply personal and far more painful than anyone expected. Alison Maria Krauss was born on July 23, 1971, in Decatur, Illinois, and raised in Champaign. She grew up in a structured household where discipline was important. Her father was a German immigrant who worked as a professor at the University of Illinois, and her mother, who was of Italian descent, supported her children's education and interests. At just 5 years old, Alison began studying classical violin. But this wasn't just a casual hobby. Classical training demands precision, patience, and control, especially for a child. While other kids were still figuring out what they liked, Alison was learning posture, bow technique, and musical discipline. This early structure shaped how she approached music for the rest of her life. By the age of 8, her focus shifted toward fiddle music. She began entering local fiddle contests, often competing against players much older than herself. Surprisingly, she won. At just 12 years old, Alison became the Illinois State Fiddle Champion. This achievement marked her as someone operating far beyond her age group. Soon enough, in bluegrass circles, people began paying attention. At 14, she recorded music for the first time. That same year, she signed a record deal with Rounder Records, a label known for traditional American roots music. Signing a professional record deal at 14 is unusual. Doing it without hype or controversy is even rarer. In 1987, she released her first solo album, Too Late to Cry. The album established her as a serious young musician with technical skill and emotional restraint. Around that same time, Alison was invited to join the band Union Station. Union Station would eventually become central to her career. Their collaboration was built on mutual respect and shared musical values. And in 1989, they released Two Highways, their first album together. The record showed that Alison wasn't just a talented solo artist, she was a natural collaborator and a steady presence in a group setting. Her major breakthrough came in 1990 with I've Got That Old Feeling. The album earned her her first Grammy Award and introduced her to a wider audience. Her voice was soft but precise. Every note was controlled, and every word was understandable. Throughout the 1990s, Alison Krauss built her career steadily. She toured extensively with Union Station, earning a reputation as a reliable live performer who delivered exactly what audiences came to hear. Her sound stayed rooted in bluegrass while remaining accessible. In 2000, her career reached another level when she contributed to the soundtrack of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The soundtrack became a massive cultural success and introduced bluegrass and traditional American music to millions of new listeners. Alison's voice stood out immediately. Over the years, awards followed. By the time her career matured, Alison Krauss had won over 27 Grammy Awards from 46 nominations, making her one of the most awarded female artists in Grammy history. She also received major recognition for her work on Cold Mountain, including a World Soundtrack Award for You Will Be My Ain True Love. By every visible measure, Alison Krauss's career looked stable. successful, and uninterrupted. She had longevity, respect, and influence. She helped bring bluegrass into the mainstream without compromising its roots. She inspired younger musicians who saw that consistency could still lead to lasting success. But while the public saw a flawless professional life, something else was happening away from the stage. The years of touring, recording, and maintaining that level of control came with personal costs that Alison never discussed publicly. The shadows behind the fame. By the late 1990s, Alison Krauss had reached a level of success that few musicians ever touch. She was winning awards consistently, touring internationally, and working with some of the most respected names in music. On the surface, everything looked stable. However, behind the scenes, the pace and pressure of maintaining that standard were taking a toll that never made headlines. One of the most visible changes during this period was her physical health. Over time, Krauss lost approximately 30 pounds. This drastic change came from a deliberate decision to regain energy after years of physical strain. Touring required extended periods of travel, late nights, and repeated performances with little downtime. Alison found it difficult to manage fatigue and stamina on the stage. Rather than following restrictive diets or short-term plans, Krauss focused on constant adjustments. She prioritized balanced nutrition, regular routines, and consistency over extreme weight loss efforts. These changes were gradual and carried out privately. As her physical health stabilized, her endurance improved. Long sets became easier to manage, and her ability to maintain vocal control during tours increased. Audiences began to notice that her energy on stage appeared steadier, and her movements more confident. Krauss later acknowledged that this period marked a personal turning point in how she approached her body and long-term health. At the same time all of this was happening, Alison Krauss was quietly fighting something she had dealt with for most of her career: perfectionism. From the very beginning, Alison had built her reputation on being precise. Every note mattered to her. Every harmony had to sit just right. That mindset followed her everywhere, into every recording session and onto every stage she stepped on. She didn't just sing songs, she studied them. She replayed takes over and over. She second-guessed small details most listeners would never notice. And even when a song was technically finished, she often wasn't satisfied. More than once, music that was already complete ended up sitting on the shelf because it didn't meet her internal standards. Albums took longer than expected. Projects were delayed without explanation. Fans would wait, sometimes for years, wondering why nothing new was coming out. Behind the scenes, Alison was struggling to let go of her own work. She has admitted that finishing something felt harder than starting it. No matter how much effort she put in, she often felt it still wasn't good enough. Over time, that constant self-criticism started to build up, but the pressure didn't stop with her solo work either. Inside Union Station, the expectations were just as high. Rehearsals were intense, arrangements were carefully planned, and performances were tightly controlled. Alison held herself to an extremely high standard, and that same standard naturally carried over to the people around her. While she remained professional, the environment could feel heavy at times. Band members worked, knowing that flexibility was limited. Perhaps the most surprising challenge Alison faced was the constant expectations. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Krauss had become one of the most decorated female artists in Grammy history. Unfortunately, that kind of success doesn't just bring praise, it brings pressure and expectations. Every new album was compared to the last. Every performance was measured against her past work. There was a constant unspoken assumption that she would always deliver something flawless, no matter what was happening in her personal life or how exhausted she might be. But Alison never felt comfortable with fame itself. She showed up for interviews. She did promotional appearances. She played the role she had to play. But celebrity culture was never something she embraced. She cared about the music, not the spotlight. And as her profile grew, that disconnect became harder to manage. She was expected to be accessible and visible, while at the same time trying to protect her privacy and emotional space. That balancing act added another layer of strain to an already demanding life. Touring only made everything harder. Long stretches on the road with Union Station required constant physical and mental stamina. Later, touring with Robert Plant introduced bigger venues, different audiences, and even more pressure to deliver night after night. These weren't casual shows. Every performance was watched closely, and every vocal was judged. Soon enough, fatigue started to pile up. Her recovery time was limited, and her travel schedules were packed. To make matters worse, being away from home for so long created distance from the people who mattered most to her. Time with her family became rare. Life started to feel like a constant cycle of airports, hotels, sound checks, and stages. Even though the tours were successful, the emotional cost became too much to bear. Alison began feeling more isolated, and the responsibility of meeting expectations every single night started to weigh heavily on her. As this struggle continued, her confidence also began to shake. Maintaining control over performances became something she worried about instead of something she trusted. Each show carried decades of expectation on its shoulders. Instead of simply performing, she found herself managing pressure, managing fatigue, and managing the fear of falling short. That's when she finally realized something had to change. Away from the public eye, Alison started working on herself. She reportedly sought therapy. She focused on rebuilding confidence in quieter, private ways. She also began reassessing how much work she took on, how hard she pushed herself, and what success really meant anymore. Eventually, she made some progress, and for the first time in years, she stopped forcing herself to power through exhaustion. And just when she was finally beginning to feel more stable again, public attention moved away from her music and toward her personal views. The comments she made, opinions she quietly held, and ideas she supported began drawing public scrutiny. This shift brought a different kind of pressure that had nothing to do with singing or songwriting, and it would soon place her at the center of controversy, changing how people viewed her silence, her distance from fame, and the choices she had been making all along. Alison Krauss's controversial artistic stance. For decades, Alison Krauss kept her focus almost entirely on music. She wasn't known for bold statements or public debates. Her career was built on songs, performances, and consistency. But as her fame grew, people began paying closer attention not just to what she sang, but to what she chose not to sing about. One of the most talked about parts of Alison's career has been her decision to keep politics out of her music. She first explained this clearly in a 2011 interview. During that conversation, Alison said that bluegrass had always been rooted in everyday life. She talked about how the genre grew from stories of love, loss, faith, family, hard work, and survival. To her, bluegrass was never meant to argue or take sides. She saw it as music people turned to when they needed comfort or peace, especially during stressful times. She went on to say that while a few artists had brought political messages into bluegrass, she personally didn't want to take that route. Alison explained that she preferred her songs to focus on shared human experiences instead of current political debates. In her words, music worked best when it helped people escape for a moment, rather than reminding them of everything they were already overwhelmed by. That single interview changed how many people viewed her. Some fans respected her even more for it. They felt bluegrass had survived for generations because it stayed simple and honest. And they agreed with Alison that politics would only divide listeners who came to the music for relief. However, others felt disappointed. They believed music should respond to what's happening in the world, and they saw her silence as a missed opportunity to speak up during important moments. Yet, Alison didn't change her position. She continued to say that she wasn't trying to ignore what was happening in the world. She simply wanted her music to offer something different. She believed songs should focus on emotions and personal stories, not news headlines, government policies, or political movements. That choice sometimes put her at odds with other artists. While some musicians used their platforms to push for change, Alison stayed focused on storytelling. She didn't criticize artists who took a more political path, but she didn't join them either. But politics wasn't the only area where she faced criticism. As her career grew, Alison began blending bluegrass with country and pop influences. While this helped her reach a much larger audience, it also upset traditional bluegrass fans. Some purists felt she was moving too far away from the genre's roots. They believed the smoother sound and broader appeal weakened traditional bluegrass. But Alison didn't pull back. She kept working with Union Station and continued making music the way she felt was right. Inside the industry, she was known for wanting full creative control. In the studio, she paid close attention to every detail. She often asked for multiple takes and spent extra time on arrangements. Within Union Station, her high standards shaped everything. Rehearsals were serious. Performances were carefully planned. Recordings were done slowly and deliberately. This approach sometimes caused tension, especially during long tours or long recording sessions, but the band stayed together and continued to earn respect for their work. One of the biggest moments of her career came in 2007 when she released Raising Sand with Robert Plant. The collaboration surprised many people. Plant was famous worldwide for Led Zeppelin, while Alison came from bluegrass and American roots music. Critics loved the album, and it won several Grammy Awards. Still, not everyone was happy. Some longtime bluegrass fans questioned why she worked with a rock legend. They felt it pulled her even further away from traditional bluegrass. To them, the project showed she was moving toward mainstream music. Alison didn't argue publicly with these opinions. She kept performing the songs and stayed focused on her work. As the awards continued to come in, pressure from the industry grew stronger. Many admired her steady approach to music and saw her as someone who protected bluegrass from trends and political drama. However, others felt disappointed that she didn't speak out during important social moments like award shows. Throughout all of this, she focused on recording when she could, touring when she felt able, and protecting the music she cared about. But the attention surrounding her decisions added pressure during a time when her personal life was already struggling. Because while Alison Krauss was building one of the most respected careers in American music, her personal life was unfolding quietly in the background. The heartbreaking divorce that shook her. In the mid-1990s, Alison met Pat Burgesson through the Nashville music scene. At the time, both were already established musicians. Alison was rising quickly as a Grammy-winning bluegrass artist, while Pat had built a solid reputation as a guitarist and harmonica player who worked across jazz, country, and session music. Pat Burgesson wasn't new to the industry. He had been discovered years earlier by legendary producer Chet Atkins and had gone on to collaborate with artists like Lyle Lovett and Shelby Lynne. In Nashville, he was known as a versatile musician who could adapt to almost any style. Music was the common ground that brought him and Alison together. Their relationship developed quietly, away from cameras and headlines. This wasn't accidental. Alison had always preferred to keep her private life separate from her career, and this relationship followed the same pattern. They built their connection in the background, while both continued working on their own projects. In 1997, Alison Krauss and Pat Burgesson got married. The wedding was low-key, with very little media attention, which suited Alison just fine. Even at that point, she was already one of the most respected voices in bluegrass, but she chose not to turn her marriage into a public event. Pat, on the other hand, continued building his career as a session musician, while Alison balanced recording, touring, and her growing responsibilities at home. 2 years later, in 1999, they welcomed their son, Sam Burgesson. Motherhood changed Alison's priorities. She eventually opened up about how difficult it was to balance raising a child while maintaining a demanding touring schedule. Traveling for weeks or months at a time became harder, and she began adjusting her work commitments so she could spend more time at home. Sam occasionally appeared with her at public events, but Alison made a clear effort to keep him out of the spotlight. She wanted him to have a normal childhood, far away from the pressures of fame. Behind closed doors, however, life was becoming complicated. Both Alison and Pat had careers that required travel, long hours, and creative focus. Industry insiders later pointed to these pressures, along with lifestyle differences, as factors that strained the marriage. Neither of them ever spoke publicly about the details, and Alison especially kept that chapter of her life private. In 2001, just 4 years after they married, Alison Krauss and Pat Burgesson divorced. There were no public fights, no dramatic statements, no courtroom spectacle. The split was described as amicable, and the legal process was handled quietly with minimal media coverage. Alison never shared the specific reasons behind the breakup, and Pat didn't either. They both chose privacy over public explanation. Following the divorce, Alison reportedly retained custody of their son and shifted her focus toward raising him while continuing her music career. Pat returned fully to session work and touring, rebuilding his professional life independently. But for Alison, the divorce marked a turning point. After that experience, she became even more guarded about her personal relationships. Interviews stayed focused on music. Questions about her love life were usually avoided or redirected. She rarely spoke about dating, and over time, it became clear that she had drawn a firm line between her public career and her private world. Emotionally, the separation left its mark. Rather than talking about it publicly, Alison channeled those feelings into her work. Her 2004 album, Lonely Runs Both Ways, carried themes of heartbreak, distance, and emotional survival. While she never said the record was directly about her divorce, many listeners noticed how deeply personal the songs felt. The album reflected a woman processing loss while trying to stay strong for her child and her career. Since that divorce, Alison Krauss has never remarried. Over the years, she has been linked to a few collaborators, but none of those relationships were ever confirmed. She kept her personal life tightly guarded, choosing to let her music speak instead. But while fans saw a steady professional presence, another painful chapter was still ahead, one that would eventually force her to step away from music entirely. And when the real reason behind that break finally came out, it revealed just how much Alison Krauss had been carrying in silence. The tragic reason: Alison quit. By the early 2010s, Alison Krauss had already spent nearly her entire life singing, recording, touring, and performing. This had been part of her routine since she was a teenager. Music wasn't just her job, it was who she was. But then, around 2013 and 2014, something started to go wrong. At first, it didn't seem like a major crisis. Her voice would crack unexpectedly. Some nights, it felt tight. Other times, it simply wouldn't respond the way it always had. Alison tried to push through it, the same way performers often do. But the problems kept getting worse. Eventually, doctors diagnosed her with dysphonia, a neurological condition that affects the muscles of the larynx. In simple terms, the muscles that control the voice stop working properly. For a singer, that's devastating. Suddenly, Alison couldn't rely on her voice anymore. She later explained exactly what it felt like, saying, "I'd go on stage and it would shut down. In the studio, my throat would close up. That was a pain in the neck, literally." This wasn't just occasional hoarseness. Her voice would tighten without warning. Notes wouldn't come out. Sometimes it felt like her throat simply stopped working in the middle of a performance. By 2014, Alison reached a painful realization. She could no longer perform at the level she was known for. She began canceling tours. Recording sessions were put on hold. For the first time since she started making music in the 1980s, her career came to a sudden stop. Instead of moving from studio to stage, she shifted her focus to therapy, vocal rest, and medical treatment. The hardest part wasn't just losing her voice, it was losing the thing that had defined her for decades. Alison admitted that during this time, she couldn't even stand to hear herself sing because of how strained and broken her voice sounded. Imagine spending your entire life perfecting something, only to suddenly feel disconnected from it. That was her reality. Emotionally, it hit her hard. Singing had always been her way of expressing herself. It was how she processed life. It was how she connected with people. Now, even speaking could feel difficult some days. She described the silence as deeply personal and painful. She worried that she might never fully recover, and that fear followed her through months of therapy and uncertainty. Fans began to notice her absence. There were no new albums, no major tours, no clear explanation at first. Some people quietly wondered if she had retired. Others assumed she had simply stepped back to focus on family. Alison didn't rush to correct the rumors. She was too busy trying to heal. But even in the middle of all that, she didn't give up. She committed herself to vocal therapy and slowly worked on rebuilding control over her voice. Progress was not quick. Some days were better than others. It required patience, discipline, and learning how to sing differently than she had before. She had to retrain muscles that had once worked automatically. The break from music slowed her career momentum, but it also showed another side of her. For the first time, fans saw just how vulnerable she was behind the calm public image. And yet, she stayed determined. She wasn't ready to walk away. After years of quiet recovery, Alison finally felt strong enough to return. In 2017, she released Windy City, her first solo album in 14 years. The project marked her official comeback, and it was received with warmth and respect across the industry. For many listeners, it felt like hearing an old friend again. The album proved that she had fought her way back, but she didn't stop there. In 2021, she reunited with Robert Plant for Raise the Roof, showing that she had regained enough vocal control to take on demanding collaborative work again. The album was praised, and her performances confirmed that she had overcome the worst of her condition. The experience changed how she approached music forever. She came back stronger, but also more guarded. And while fans were grateful to hear her sing again, many began asking a new question. After everything she had been through, how much longer did she plan to keep going? Is Alison Krauss about to retire? At the start of 2026, Alison Krauss found herself at the center of a new wave of online speculation. In January, rumors began spreading across social media, claiming that she was preparing to retire from music. Some posts suggested she was feeling worn out after decades in the industry. Others claimed she was ready to step away to focus on a quieter life. A few even hinted that an official announcement was coming, but it turns out that none of it was true. Alison Krauss has not released any official statement on retirement. In fact, she's made it clear in recent interviews that she still loves making music, especially bluegrass and traditional storytelling. Singing for her isn't something she's trying to escape. It's something she continues to protect and approach carefully after everything she's been through. And her recent work proves that she's still very much active. In March 2025, Alison Krauss and Union Station released Arcadia, their first album together in 14 years. For longtime fans, it felt like a homecoming. The 10-song project leaned heavily into classic bluegrass themes like hope, heartbreak, loss, and survival. The group produced the album themselves, keeping full creative control over the sound. Critics described Arcadia as a timeless return to form. Many praised how the record balanced emotional storytelling with the technical precision Alison is known for. After the album's release, Alison spent much of 2025 back on the road with Union Station. They toured across several states, including Idaho, Utah, Montana, and Washington. Some of those performances took place around her 54th birthday in July 2025. For fans who had worried about her health after her vocal struggles years earlier, seeing her back on stage was reassuring. Her return to touring showed just how much she had learned from her time away. She now schedules performances more carefully. She protects her voice. She allows herself rest between shows. Everything about her approach is more measured than it was earlier in her career. Alison Krauss is still recording, still touring, and still deeply involved in preserving traditional bluegrass while allowing her sound to grow naturally. She's not chasing fame. She's not chasing numbers. She's focused on making music that feels honest to her. After surviving vocal illness, divorce, and decades of pressure, Alison Krauss chooses a slower, more intentional path. And for an artist who has spent most of her life giving pieces of herself to audiences, that may be the most important change of all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.